I was standing at the edge of the community pool, dripping wet, when I saw the 3 HOA board members marching toward my 8-year-old son like he was some kind of criminal. Their orange-pink suited leader, Patricia Hanford, had her sunglasses pushed up like she owned the sun itself. My boy had just finished his swimming laps for practice, grinning ear to ear, when they boxed him in. Patricia pointed to him, then to a clipboard, then back to him again. The lifeguards watched awkwardly. Parents went silent. A couple even stepped back like my kid was contagious. I could feel the heat rise in my chest, but I stayed still. Combat veterans don't move fast. We observe. My son's smile faded. His shoulders curled in. And then I heard Patricia announce to the entire pool deck that my son was being banned for violating community pool standards. The same standards the HOA rewrote last Tuesday. Behind closed doors. Without notice. Targeting exactly one family. Mine. People started whispering. A few nodded along because gossip travels faster than chlorine fumes. I stepped forward, calm, dripping, cold-eyed. Patricia's smile twitched. And that's when my son, the most gentle kid in the world, asked in a shaking voice if he had done something wrong. I told him no, the HOA had. Patricia lifted her chin. She said the board had the power to remove any resident from the pool at any time. She said children with my son's history posed a risk. My son's history, meaning the anxiety he struggled with after losing his mom. Meaning the nights he woke up scared. Meaning the therapy sessions that nobody knew about because she somehow found them anyway. And that's when I knew this wasn't about pool rules. They wanted control. They wanted obedience. And they wanted me to bend. But before I could say a word, Patricia smirked and said something that made every muscle in my body lock into combat mode. She said they would make sure my son never stepped foot in the pool again. I took one breath. Just one. Because Patricia had no idea who she had just challenged. And she was about to find out. I turned around, gathered my son's towel, and walked away without a word, because by the time I returned, the HOA would regret ever crossing my family. I told my son to sit tight in the car with the AC running while I dried off and changed. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded, eyes red, clutching the pool towel like a shield. That hurt worse than anything Patricia could have said. Kids shouldn't learn the world is cruel this early. When I got inside the locker room, I stared at myself in the mirror for a moment. Wet hair, red shoulders, jaw clenched. I had faced worse than an HOA in my life. Enemy fire, ambushes, the kind of nights you don't talk about. But something about this felt different. More personal. More targeted. Not toward me, toward my boy. And that's a line you don't cross. I changed clothes, stuffed everything in my gym bag, and walked back out onto the pool deck. The HOA board was still there, huddled around Patricia like she was royalty. She saw me approach and puffed her chest a little, as if she expected a scene. She probably hoped for one. HOAs like hers thrive on making others look unstable. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I walked right past them, didn't even look at them, and that bothered her more than yelling ever could. Back at my truck, my son whispered that he didn't want to get anyone in trouble. I told him he wasn't. Not even close. This wasn't about trouble. This was about boundaries. And the HOA had bulldozed straight across ours. On the drive home, I replayed the whole scene in my head, mentally tagging every detail. Who stood where? Who nodded? Who looked away? Who whispered? In my line of work, pattern recognition becomes instinct. The pool incident wasn't spontaneous. It was coordinated. Someone put them up to it. Someone wanted the board to target my family. The question was why. When we pulled into our driveway, Patricia's little entourage was already there. Standing on my lawn. Clipboards out. Phones recording. Shoes digging into my grass like they owned it. My son tensed up, shrinking in his seat. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was harassment. I stepped out of the truck and watched the group scurry into a formation around Patricia. She raised her clipboard with a theatrical flourish, as if she were presenting a royal decree. They claimed my front yard landscaping violated new community uniformity standards. My paint color was outdated. My mailbox height was non-compliant by half an inch. My side gate latch was safety deficient. They listed 28 violations on the spot. I asked them one question. When were these new rules voted on? Patricia crossed her arms. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence told me everything. They made the rules. They enforced the rules. They rewrote the rules. And they did it to break us. My son peeked from the window, gripping the seatbelt. He saw them pointing at the house. He saw them take pictures. He saw Patricia walking toward the porch like she owned the place. His face went pale. And that was the moment I made a decision. This wasn't going to be a complaint, or a meeting, or a polite disagreement. This was war. And I don't lose wars. By the time Patricia and her clipboard brigade finally cleared off my lawn, the sun was dropping behind the houses, painting the street in orange streaks. It should have been peaceful, suburban, quiet, but the air felt wrong, too still, too watchful, like the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. I walked my son inside, made him a snack, and told him to play video games for a while. He forced a smile, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Kids sense tension better than adults ever give them credit for. He kept glancing toward the front windows like he expected Patricia to burst through them. I didn't like that. Not at all. Once he was settled, I stepped out onto the porch alone. The HOA had left, but they hadn't gone far. A silver SUV sat half a block away, engine running, headlights off. Inside, I could see the faint glow of a phone screen. Someone was recording, or waiting. This was Intimidation 101. Basic pressure tactics. Most families would crumble under it. They would apologize, comply, pay fines, repaint their house, and grovel just to stop the harassment. But I'm not most families. And I sure as hell don't bow to people in orange-pink suits with power complexes. I took a slow walk around my yard, studying every angle, every line of sight. The board wanted leverage. They wanted footage they could twist, take out of context, weaponize. HOAs like this rely on fear, not fairness. And fear only works if you're blind. So I decided I wouldn't be. I grabbed a notebook from my truck and drew a quick layout of the property. Then I marked every blind spot, every vantage point, every ideal location for observation points. Old habit. In the teams, we called it building an Overwatch grid. Here in suburbia, it was going to serve a slightly different purpose. Before doing anything else, I walked across the street to where an elderly neighbor, Mr. Caldwell, was bringing in his trash bins. He looked nervous as I approached, glancing toward the HOA SUV. He lowered his voice when I got close. "Patricia was on your lawn before you even got home," he murmured. "They were taking pictures of everything, even your backyard. I think they were waiting for you." That matched my suspicion. I asked if he'd seen anyone else watching us. He swallowed hard and nodded toward the second-story window of a nearby house. Curtains moved, just barely. A phone lens glinted. Somebody ducked back inside. So they had more eyes than I thought. Good. Let them watch. The more they recorded, the bigger their mistake would become. I thanked Caldwell and headed back home. On the way, I noticed something small but important. Patricia's car had been there earlier. She must have parked around back now. That meant she hadn't left the area. She was circling, waiting for me to react. She wanted anger. She wanted confrontation. She wanted a meltdown she could turn into ammunition. What she got instead was me walking inside calmly and firing up my laptop. I pulled up the HOA bylaws. I had skimmed them before we bought the house, but now I read them like a prosecutor preparing for trial. And that's when I discovered the real gem buried 7 pages deep. The HOA's authority ended at my fence line. The pool rules didn't apply to private residents outside the clubhouse. The landscaping regulations hadn't been updated in 3 years. And surveillance, harassment, and unannounced inspections were explicitly forbidden. I leaned back in my chair, the beginnings of a plan forming in my head. If the HOA wanted to collect evidence, fine, I'd give them evidence. But mine would be 1,000 times clearer. When I stepped back outside, the SUV was idling even closer to my house now, pretending to be subtle, failing miserably. I stood in the driveway, staring straight at the tinted window until whoever was inside realized I wasn't moving. The SUV peeled away. Cowards always run when confronted with someone who knows the rules better than they do. I went back inside, opened my browser, and placed an order. Not for one camera, not for two, for 18. Wide angle, motion activated, infrared, cloud synced. If the HOA wanted a war of surveillance, I would give them the high-definition version. And the first camera I installed? I put it right above the front door, pointed directly at the spot where Patricia liked to stand when she issued her threats in her loud orange-pink suit. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was documenting, and the HOA had no idea how badly that would backfire. The next morning, the neighborhood looked peaceful enough on the surface. Sprinklers ticking, lawnmowers humming in the distance, moms jogging with strollers, the kind of suburban calm that makes you think nothing bad could ever happen here. But underneath that postcard image, the HOA had already begun their next move. I saw it the moment I opened my front door. A bright orange violation notice was taped to the middle of my porch, dead center, like Patricia wanted it to be the first thing I saw when I stepped out. The paper glowed like a hazard sign. Unauthorized landscaping modifications, non-compliant exterior fixtures, unapproved structural additions. They listed 12 violations, and I hadn't added anything yet. Not a shrub, not a chair, not a single screw. The message was obvious. We don't need a reason. We just need control. I folded the notice neatly and slipped it into a folder labeled evidence. Then I checked the freshly installed front camera. It had caught everything. The time Patricia arrived, the angle she approached the house, and the way she smirked as she placed the violation on my door. Good. Proof is leverage. And leverage ends bullies. After dropping my son off at school, I drove past the community pool, the heart of the whole conflict. The gate was locked even though it was supposed to be open. A fresh HOA bulletin was zip-tied to the fence. Members with pending disciplinary review are prohibited from bringing children to shared amenities until further notice. It didn't mention my name. It didn't have to. Everyone in the neighborhood knew exactly who it was about. Two moms whispered as I passed. One looked sympathetic, the other terrified. That's what HOAs like this create. Fear disguised as order. It keeps people quiet, compliant, and exhausted. The pool attendant, a teenager who normally waved cheerfully, kept his gaze low and pretended to check his clipboard. He wasn't avoiding me out of malice. He was scared of the HOA. It was clear. They were tightening the screws. Good. I needed them overconfident. When I got home, I started installing the backyard cameras. High on the fence line under the deck, angled toward the blind corners. I'd done reconnaissance in far more dangerous environments. This was easy by comparison. Halfway through mounting camera number 4, I heard footsteps behind me. It was my neighbor, Melissa, the only board member who wasn't drunk on HOA power. She wrung her hands nervously, glancing at the fence like she expected Patricia to materialize through it. She said Patricia was calling an emergency HOA meeting tonight. Something about a community safety issue. I asked her what the issue was. Melissa looked embarrassed, voice shaky as she repeated what Patricia had told the board. A potentially dangerous ex-military resident displaying aggressive surveillance behavior. And there it was, the spin. Not the HOA trespassing on my property. Not them filming my kid. Not them leaving threats on my porch. No. Me installing cameras somehow made me the threat. Classic bully tactics. Invert the truth. Act like the victim. Mobilize the scared against the strong. I thanked her for the warning and continued working. She lingered, chewing her lip, then quietly admitted she didn't believe a word Patricia said. But she was outnumbered on the board and scared of being voted out. Fear again. It ran this neighborhood more effectively than any rulebook. By noon, the cameras were all online. I pulled up the live feed and watched every angle stitched together into a smooth, panoramic view of the entire property. Felt good to see everything clearly. But the HOA didn't appreciate clarity. 3 hours later, I caught movement on camera 12. A shadow slipped along the side of my house, hugging the siding. Someone crouched, trying to stay beneath the line of sight. Someone trespassing. I zoomed in. There she was. Patricia, in her orange-pink suit, crouching behind my air conditioning unit with a digital camera in her hand, snapping photos like she was documenting a crime scene. She hadn't noticed my new cameras yet, but the cameras had noticed her. She crept along the wall, snapping picture after picture, completely confident that I couldn't see her. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. They wanted to escalate? Perfect. Because now I had her on video. Trespassing. Documenting. Lying in wait. This wasn't just HOA harassment anymore. This was evidence. And the board meeting tonight? They had no idea what was coming. I arrived at the HOA clubhouse 15 minutes early, but the parking lot was already packed. Cars lined the street. Neighbors huddled together in nervous clusters, whispering like they were attending a trial instead of a community meeting. Patricia's silver SUV sat front and center, angled dramatically across 2 parking spots. A dominance move. Her orange-pink suit shined under the streetlights like a warning flare. She stood near the entrance greeting people with that soft, sugary voice she used right before she slid a knife between someone's ribs with a policy citation. As I walked toward the doors, conversations softened. I darted away. Nobody wanted to be seen talking to me. Not after the bulletin she'd posted. Not after the rumors she'd spread. The rumors I already knew she'd planted. The whispers followed me like shadows. He's installing military surveillance tech. He's unstable. He's dangerous. He's threatening board members. Every lie was carefully crafted to isolate me. If the community saw me as a threat, they would stand with her. Fear is the HOA's currency. Patricia printed it like she owned the mint. But tonight, I came carrying something far more powerful than fear. Proof. I walked inside and took a seat near the front. The room buzzed with tension. The board sat at their table like royalty judging peasants. Except Melissa, who looked like she'd aged 10 years in a day. She gave me a small, apologetic glance that said she knew what was coming and couldn't stop any of it. Patricia slammed her gavel dramatically even though no one was talking. The room flinched. She began the meeting with her favorite technique. Talking in circles with big emotional phrases and zero substance. Community safety concerns. Threatening behavior. Escalated risks brought by certain residents. Need for immediate board action. Then she pulled out a remote and clicked on the projector. A slideshow flashed onto the screen. Photos. Dozens of them. Pictures she'd taken while trespassing on my property. My house from the side. My fence line. My security cameras. Zoomed in shots to make everything look sinister. She narrated the images like she was revealing evidence in a courtroom, painting me as a ticking time bomb who had turned my home into a military compound. She told the room that I was conducting unauthorized surveillance on the neighborhood, that my cameras faced public spaces, that parents felt unsafe letting their children walk past my house, that I had installed intimidating, aggressive hardware with no community approval. This was the moment she wanted: the gasps, the fear, the support. And she got it. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others whispered. A few nodded. It was a performance. A trial. And in her mind, the verdict was already written. She finally ended her monologue and folded her hands like she'd just saved the neighborhood. Before she could motion to vote on sanctions, the reason she called this meeting, I stood. First, Patricia tried to ignore me. She tapped papers dramatically like she didn't see me standing inches from her table. But the entire room had gone silent. I reached into my bag and placed a single USB drive on the board's table, right in front of her. The room stiffened. I spoke calmly, slowly, clearly, the way I used to brief commanders before missions. This USB contains footage from my new cameras. A time-stamped recording from earlier today. The footage clearly shows a member of this board trespassing onto my property without permission and without legal authority. That person entered restricted areas, hid behind private structures, and photographed my home without consent. A ripple went across the room like a shockwave. Even people who feared Patricia leaned forward. Patricia forced a laugh. It was high-pitched, tight, strained. She asked who I was accusing. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I tapped the folder in my hand. Inside were printed screenshots, crystal clear images. Her face, her orange-pink suit, her camera, her crouched beside my AC unit. She saw the first photo and I watched her expression fracture. Her jaw twitched. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the table. Sweat gathered at her temples. Her power cracked. The room saw it. Melissa reached for the USB with shaky fingers, like it was made of glass and dynamite. Before she plugged it in, she turned to Patricia with a question that changed the entire atmosphere. Why were you on his property? Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since I'd moved into this neighborhood, she had no answer. The HOA clubhouse smelled like burnt coffee, cheap perfume, and arrogance. Every board member sat in their usual throne-like chairs, legs crossed, noses tilted up like they were smelling something rotten. Maybe it was their attitudes. Maybe it was the fear they tried to pretend they didn't feel after Kayla's meltdown. I walked in with my son beside me, my hand gently squeezing his shoulder. Not because he needed reassurance, but because they did. The room went silent. Even the ceiling fan seemed to stop turning for a moment. Kayla, the HOA president in her signature blazing orange-pink suit, clutched her binder like a holy relic of tyranny. She forced a smile, teeth tight, voice sweet like poison. Mr. Carter, please take a seat. No, thank you. I'll stand. Her smile twitched. She hated losing control of even a chair placement. Let's begin, she said, flipping her binder open dramatically as if she were revealing state secrets. According to pool regulation B12, minors must be. I raised a finger. I'd like to address something before you start reading rules that you break more than you enforce. A few board members gasped like I'd slapped someone. Kayla leaned forward. And what exactly would that be? I looked her dead in the eye. My son has never broken a rule. Not once. However, you have broken several. First, harassment. Second, discrimination. Third, threatening a minor. Fourth, Kayla slammed the binder shut. You have no proof. I reached inside my bag. Actually, I do. I took out a small stack of printed photos and set them on the table like cards in a poker match I had already won. Each photo captured her yelling at my son, pointing aggressively, getting in his face, and blocking him from entering the pool. Board member number 3 squinted. Is that from a security camera? Yup. Kayla's face drained of color beneath her foundation. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You can't just film people without telling the HOA. You trespassed into my backyard last month. Remember that? My camera caught that too. The entire room turned to her in unison. One board member muttered, You didn't say anything about that at our enforcement meeting. Kayla glared around the room like a cornered animal. This is irrelevant. This is all irrelevant. We're discussing his son. No. We're discussing your behavior, I said calmly. You targeted my kid because you thought I wouldn't push back. You were wrong. Kayla stood, palms slamming onto the table, voice exploding across the room. I am the HOA president. I make the rules. I let the silence stretch, heavy and uncomfortable. Then I leaned forward, voice low but razor sharp. No, you enforce the rules. You don't create them. And you definitely don't get to break them because your ego can't handle being challenged. Kayla opened her mouth to scream again, but one of the older board members raised a trembling hand. Kayla, sit down. It was the first time any board member had dared to contradict her. Kayla slowly turned toward him, shocked. Excuse me? He repeated, firmer this time. Sit down. She hesitated, then sat, her orange-pink suit wrinkling as she sank into her chair like deflated scenery in a play that had gone on too long. The board member cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, we will review these violations. And until then, your son is fully cleared to use all amenities. No restrictions. My son grinned up at me. I nodded, pride swelling in my chest. Kayla stared at us with pure venom. But she didn't speak. She couldn't. The board was no longer hers. As we left the room, my son whispered, Dad, does this mean the HOA won't mess with us anymore? I paused at the door, looking back at Kayla's furious face as she tried to pull her control back together. Not a chance, buddy. They'll try something else. I put a hand on his shoulder, guiding him out. But this time we're ready. The next morning, my son and I walked outside expecting normalcy. Sunlight, birds, maybe the neighbors walking their dogs. What we didn't expect was a neon orange violation notice slapped dead center on our front door like a hostile declaration of war. My son stared at it, confused. Dad, what is that? I peeled the notice off the door, and even before reading it, the headache began. The HOA letterhead, the artificial politeness, the bold red handwriting that could only belong to Kayla. It read, "Your lawn height exceeds community standards. Immediate corrective action required." Underlined twice because her ego needed the extra attention. I exhaled, slow and controlled. Our lawn was immaculate. I mowed it 2 days ago. It looked like a golf course. This wasn't enforcement. This was retaliation. Across the street, a neighbor watering his plants looked over at me and mouthed, "Wow, she's really going for it." Oh, she wasn't done. We walked to the driveway and found a second notice on my truck's windshield. "Unauthorized vehicle. Must be removed." My son blinked. "Dad, is your truck unauthorized?" "Only if they recently banned pickup trucks," I muttered. But the real punchline? A third notice was taped to our mailbox. Garage door color violation. My garage door was white. Pure white. Standard white. The exact shade required by the HOA's own guideline sheet that I had printed and kept in a folder because I knew people like Kayla. My son crossed his arms. "She's doing this because she lost the meeting, isn't she?" Exactly. Retaliatory HOA behavior wasn't new to me. I'd seen it happen to neighbors everywhere. But few people pushed back. Most just paid the fine to avoid headaches. That's how bullies keep power, through exhaustion. But I wasn't just a dad. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was a combat veteran trained to see patterns, anticipate threats, and respond with precision. Kayla was playing checkers. I was playing chess. As we moved back toward the house, my son tugged my sleeve. "Dad, look." Kayla herself was strutting down the sidewalk in her blinding orange-pink suit. Binder clutched tight, chin held high like she was marching in a parade held exclusively in her honor. Her heels clicked with the rhythm of delusion. She stopped in front of us with a smile that could curdle milk. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. I see you found your notices." I stayed silent. She opened her binder dramatically. "I simply wanted to ensure your family understands that this neighborhood thrives on standards. And after yesterday's unpleasantness, it's important that you learn how things are handled here." My son stepped forward, voice small but steady. "We follow the rules. You just don't like my dad." Kayla blinked, surprised. Then that sugary sweet fake smile returned. Children shouldn't get involved in adult matters. I knelt beside my son, placing a reassuring hand on his back. "Actually, he has more respect and honesty than most adults you interact with, including you." Her smile evaporated. "Mr. Carter, you're quickly becoming a problem homeowner. And problematic homeowners tend to accumulate fines that, how should I put this, stack up." There it was, the threat. But I had something better than fear on my side. Evidence. "Kayla," I said, pulling out my phone, "I'd like you to look at this." Her eyes narrowed. I pressed play. Footage from my security camera lit up the screen. Kayla walking onto my property last night, measuring random things with a tape measure, taking pictures of my mailbox, and even kneeling down to scrutinize blades of grass like a crime scene analyst who'd lost her mind. She froze. Completely. You can't use this. This is illegal. This is harassment." "No, this is documentation. The kind the state attorney general's office loves to review when investigating HOA misconduct." Her face turned white, then green, then red, all within seconds. "You wouldn't dare." I smiled. "Try me." For the first time, Kayla didn't have a comeback. She spun on her heels and stormed off, her orange-pink suit practically glowing with rage. My son looked up at me. "Dad, did we just win again?" I shook my head slowly. "Not yet. Because people like her don't quit when they're losing. They double down." I watched Kayla disappear around the corner, her stiff walk betraying panic. And that's when I knew. The real fight hadn't even started. By morning, the neighborhood was buzzing with whispers. Word had traveled fast. Everyone knew Kayla had stormed off in a fury the night before, red-faced and helpless, after I exposed her trespassing on my property. Some neighbors were thrilled. Some were nervous. HOAs run on fear, not logic, and logic had just walked in and taken over the room. I had no intention of waiting for the next attack. I spent the early hours reviewing every security feed, taking notes on every potential blind spot. Kayla had tried to catch me off guard, and I refused to give her the same advantage twice. Every tree, fence post, mailbox, and corner of my property became a calculated point in my defensive grid. Cameras weren't just tools, they were shields and weapons. By mid-morning, I had installed cameras along the side alley that led directly to my backyard, capturing the path Kayla and her cronies often used when spying on neighbors. I set alerts on motion detection so even the smallest movement would ping directly to my phone. Every angle, every potential approach, every likely hiding spot was covered. If they tried to sneak onto my property again, I would see them before they even touched the grass. The first message I received was almost immediate. Motion detected. Front driveway. Timestamp. 10:42 a.m. I glanced at the screen and froze. There she was, Kayla, once again in her orange-pink pantsuit, striding across the driveway, clipboard in hand and phone in the other. She didn't know I could see her. She was moving with purpose, thinking she was invisible. She was confident, and that confidence made her reckless. I grabbed my son's hand. "Stay inside," I said calmly. He didn't argue. He understood. Kids have a way of sensing danger even when adults try to mask it. I walked out to the side of the house, keeping my distance, and called the police non-emergency line. Not to report her yet, but to document the harassment officially. Every word, every timestamp would be logged and verifiable. HOAs often think they're untouchable. I intended to prove them wrong. Kayla paused in front of the front yard camera, oblivious to its presence, and started snapping photos. She circled the car, measured the mailbox, and took notes as if preparing a case for some imaginary tribunal. I let her continue. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Silence is often louder than confrontation, and right now, my silence screamed control. Neighbors peered cautiously from behind curtains. A few whispered their support. Others hesitated. Fear still ran deep in this community. But one thing was clear. My preparations had shifted the balance. For the first time, the board didn't feel untouchable. Finally, Kayla lifted her clipboard, pointed toward my son's bedroom window, and muttered something under her breath, probably hoping he would peek out. She didn't notice me stepping fully into the driveway, arms crossed, calm and collected. "You shouldn't be here," I said simply. She froze, then forced a shaky smile. "I'm just making sure your family understands community standards." I pulled out my phone and began recording. "You're on private property. Again, you're trespassing. And this time there's a permanent record." Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened. She wanted to argue. She wanted to threaten. But she had nothing. Nothing but her fury and the knowledge that this time, she was caught. I didn't let her finish. I turned and walked back inside, closing the door behind me. She lingered for a moment, unsure whether to retreat or escalate. Then, finally, she stomped off down the street, muttering and glaring over her shoulder, the orange-pink suit nearly glowing with indignation. My son peeked from the window. "Dad, she's not coming back, right?" "Not today," I said. "But tomorrow? Who knows? People like her never quit. And that's exactly why we're ready." I leaned back in my chair, studying the motion alerts on my phone, knowing this was only the beginning. The HOA had underestimated us. And when bullies underestimate a combat veteran, the consequences can be spectacular. By late afternoon, the neighborhood had fallen into an eerie stillness. Usually, kids screamed at the pool, sprinklers hissed, and cars rolled by. Today, the only movement came from the occasional rustling of leaves, a subtle reminder that my surveillance network had the entire block covered. Every alley, fence line, and driveway was accounted for. Every potential intrusion would trigger an alert before they even reached the house. I checked my phone. Kayla had made another attempt. Motion alert, backyard. Timestamp, 3:17 p.m. I zoomed in on the live feed. She was crouched behind the neighbor's hedge, clipboard in hand, taking notes like a prosecutor preparing a case file. Her orange-pink suit was bright enough to be seen from space, but she didn't notice because she believed the HOA could act without consequence. I smiled. Confidence is the enemy of caution. She didn't know I had been preparing for this moment all day. Cameras installed on the fence posts, the roofline, the side alley, they all fed into my encrypted network. Every move she made was recorded, time-stamped, and untouchable. I tapped a few buttons and initiated alerts for every camera. Lights flicked on in the backyard, subtle enough to be non-intrusive but glaring enough to disrupt her stealth. She froze. I could see it. Confusion. Panic creeping into the corners of her face. Her clipboard shaking. I grabbed the walkie from my bag. Not because I needed it, but because it would amplify the effect. The neighbors had been watching discreetly, and the HOA's plan relied on secrecy and intimidation. Now secrecy was gone. Intimidation turned inward. From inside, I started documenting. Screenshots, videos, motion logs. Every attempt she made to bypass my defenses added to the dossier that would eventually dismantle her. She thought she was clever, but she had walked right into the trap. Minutes later, she tried to retreat. But the cameras had caught every angle. One by one, I started sending live streams to my phone, showing her approach, her retreat, her every hesitation. She didn't know the perimeter had been secured hours ago. She didn't know I could track her without leaving my chair. Then it happened. My son ran to the window. "Dad, she's trying to get into the front yard." I grabbed my jacket and told him to stay calm. "You stay inside. Watch and learn." Bullies always reveal themselves when they think they have the upper hand. Today, we were turning that around. Outside, Kayla stepped onto the driveway, paused, then glared toward the front door. I stepped onto the porch calmly, arms crossed, unshaken. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She wanted a dramatic threat, a scream, something that would rattle me. But calm confidence is a shield. She had none of it in her arsenal against someone who had already anticipated every move. I walked forward slowly, not aggressively, just deliberately, until she was fully exposed in the camera feeds. The neighbors, who had been peeking from behind curtains and fences, gasped quietly. Some whispered, others shook their heads. One even pointed discreetly, capturing the irony. The fear-instilling HOA president, now the nervous intruder, caught red-handed. I gestured toward the camera mounted above the front door. Every angle, every inch of property, every unlawful step. She realized too late that this was no ordinary confrontation. This was a digital net, perfectly set, designed to trap her actions in unalterable evidence. Patricia's confidence wavered. Her orange-pink suit, once a symbol of authority and dominance, now looked absurd against the stark, cold efficiency of the surveillance grid. She tried to salvage her dignity, but every angle, every camera, every timestamp told a story she could no longer control. I leaned back, watching the motion alerts light up my phone like a digital scoreboard. This was just the beginning. Every attempt to intimidate, every violation, every petty harassment, all documented. Every board member who had witnessed her theatrics silently absorbed the truth. The power dynamic had shifted. She retreated slowly, her steps heavy, muttering under her breath, unaware that the evidence she left behind would dismantle the intimidation she had wielded for years. I turned toward my son, who had been watching silently from the window. Today, he learned an important lesson. Bullies only have power when you let them. Preparedness, observation, and calm decisiveness can turn fear into justice. And this was only the opening move. The following day, I organized the footage. Every intrusion, every violation, every attempt by Kayla and her cronies to intimidate my family had been captured in high definition. I labeled each file meticulously: backyard trespass, front lawn harassment, pool threat, mailbox measurement, and unauthorized photography. Each timestamp, every angle was recorded and backed up on multiple drives. The HOA thought they were untouchable. I was about to prove them catastrophically wrong. I printed a few keyframes and created a visual dossier. Photos of Kayla crouched behind the air conditioning unit, clipboard raised, glaring at the property line. Her orange-pink suit almost glowing against the shadowed siding. Images of her pointing aggressively at my son at the pool. Each photo told a story, an undeniable truth. I reached out to Melissa, the one sympathetic board member, and asked her to review the files. She came over cautiously, entering through the side gate like someone stepping into a minefield. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the images. Evidence after evidence laid bare. "You captured everything," she whispered. I nodded. If anyone ever questioned what happened, it was all here. Untouchable. Irrefutable. Melissa's hands trembled slightly. She admitted she had feared standing against Kayla before, but now the tide had turned. With this, the board couldn't ignore the truth. They couldn't claim ignorance. They couldn't spin or manipulate. They were trapped. I also sent copies to a local attorney specializing in HOA disputes. Even professionals were shocked at the extent of the harassment. Unauthorized entries, surveillance of a minor, intimidation, retaliatory notices, and blatant disregard for bylaws. I had built a solid legal wall around my family. By mid-afternoon, Kayla realized something was wrong. Her motion alerts went off. Multiple cameras now recorded her as she prowled the street, checking angles, plotting her next move. She stopped suddenly. She realized she had no safe approach, no secret vantage point, and no leverage. Every attempt she made to intimidate had become documentation that worked against her. I watched as she stomped across the sidewalk, muttering, orange-pink suit wrinkled, hair slightly disheveled. Her dominance had crumbled under the weight of evidence she didn't anticipate. I didn't need to intervene physically. The truth was my weapon, and it was more than enough. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains and hedges. Some whispered encouragement. Others took discreet photos. Fear in the neighborhood shifted. For the first time, the community saw the bully for what she was. A woman overstepping boundaries, caught repeatedly, unable to maintain her authority without deceit and intimidation. Later, I placed a final set of cameras inside the backyard and driveway, completely visible, to ensure anyone approaching would be captured. My son watched the installation with fascination, learning the principles of observation, documentation, and strategic defense. This was more than cameras. This was education, empowerment, and protection all in one. As evening fell, I reviewed the footage again. Every photo, every alert, every trespass meticulously cataloged. Kayla had no idea how carefully I had prepared. She thought the cameras were just deterrents. But they were also traps. Evidence traps, stacked, immovable, undeniable. I leaned back and watched the neighborhood quiet down. My son sat beside me, exhausted but alert. He looked up and asked, "Dad, are we done with her?" "Not yet," I said. "This is only the beginning." The moment a bully feels untouchable is the moment they become most vulnerable. We are ready for what comes next, and the HOA doesn't even know it. Patricia's orange-pink suit might shine, but her authority is gone. Every board member who witnessed her antics now has a choice. Continue supporting the bully or step away from her corruption. Evidence has leveled the playing field, and the moment of reckoning is approaching. The morning sun lit the street, but the air felt charged. Something had shifted in the neighborhood. Whispers ran from house to house. Board members who had once nodded obediently at Kayla's every command now avoided eye contact. Fear had flipped, her fear, not ours. She didn't even realize it yet, but the balance of power had completely changed. I arrived at the clubhouse early, carrying a stack of printed photos and my laptop. Kayla was already there, of course, in her signature orange-pink suit, striding in like she owned every inch of the room. Her heels clicked across the tile floor, but the confidence wasn't there anymore. The betrayal of evidence weighs heavier than any fine. I set my materials on the table, arranged neatly, each photo labeled, time-stamped, and ready for review. The board filtered in, some nervous, some curious, all uneasy. They had heard the rumors, seen the whispers, and most importantly, realized something had shifted. This was no longer just a domestic HOA dispute. This was accountability in action. Kayla began her usual monologue, hands waving, voice tight with forced authority. Community safety, rules enforcement, intimidation avoidance. But the eyes in the room were no longer hers alone. Melissa, the sympathetic member, whispered quietly to a neighbor, "This will backfire." And it did. I leaned forward. "Today," I said calmly, "I will show you all exactly what happened. Every violation, every trespass, every intimidation attempt is documented here. No guesswork. No exaggeration. No he said, she said. Proof." I started the presentation. First, the backyard footage. Kayla crouched behind the air conditioning unit, snapping photos of my property. Then the driveway footage. She circled my car, measured the mailbox, inspected the grass blades like a forensic analyst on a federal case. Then the pool. My son standing there, innocent yet harassed. Pointed fingers, aggressive postures, and shrill warnings all captured in clear HD. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Some mouths opened, some eyes widened. Melissa reached over and whispered, "Oh my God. She's done it." The room collectively realized Kayla's reign of fear had been fully documented and exposed. Kayla's lips moved, but the words made no sense. Her confidence crumbled like dry clay. She tried to protest, but the evidence was undeniable. She had trespassed, harassed, and threatened a minor, all while claiming moral high ground. The stack of photos, the video footage, the timestamps, untouchable, irrefutable, catastrophic. I handed the folder to the board. "Take it. Review it. Understand that this is the truth of your HOA president." They looked at each other. Some hesitated. Some swallowed hard. And for the first time, Kayla had no allies in the room. She pointed at me, voice shaking. "You can't do this. You're..." "Enough," I interrupted. The room had seen enough. The law does not bend to your ego. The board now has all the evidence it needs to make a fair judgment. And I suggest that judgment be swift. Silence filled the room. Her orange-pink suit seemed almost ridiculous now, glaring in the sunlight streaming through the windows, highlighting the fury that no longer commanded respect. Every person in the room could see the truth. Melissa cleared her throat. "We will review this," she said cautiously, "and determine the proper action." No one dared to speak against her. Kayla slumped into her chair, furious but powerless. As I gathered my son's hand, leaving the room, I glanced back. The entire board now had a choice: support the bully or enforce justice. And justice was coming. The cameras, the evidence, the planning, all of it had shifted the power. Kayla was no longer untouchable. The game had changed. Outside, neighbors peeked from behind curtains and fences, watching, whispering, finally realizing that even the most overbearing HOA president could be held accountable. I turned to my son. Today, he learned something crucial. Preparation, documentation, and calm confidence can turn fear into empowerment. The bully has been exposed. The community has witnessed it. And the era of intimidation is ending. But there's more to be done. Kayla may try one last desperate move. I smiled, knowing we were ready. The air felt thick that evening, tense like the calm before a storm. Kayla, in her orange-pink suit, had gathered a small contingent of loyalists for one last attempt at regaining control. Their plan was subtle, insidious. Create confusion, sow doubt, and intimidate anyone who dared stand against them. But they underestimated one key factor. I had anticipated every angle. Every move they thought would work was already countered. I spent the morning double-checking all camera feeds. Motion alerts, timestamps, and audio capture were fully operational. Every inch of the property, front, side, and backyard had overlapping coverage. There was no blind spot. Kayla and her followers would not know where they were exposed until it was too late. The entire neighborhood could witness the unfolding chaos if necessary. Transparency was my secret weapon. By mid-afternoon, The HOA board convened in the clubhouse. Kayla strutted in first, head held high, trying to project the confidence she no longer felt. Her followers trickled in behind her, faces tight with anxiety. I arrived shortly after, calm, collected, and carrying a full dossier of evidence that would leave no room for denial. Melissa greeted me with a knowing glance. She had already reviewed the security footage and printed photographs. She whispered, "Today it ends." I nodded subtly. Indeed it would. The meeting began. Kayla tried her usual theatrics, loudly explaining why the board should ignore the mounting evidence and maintain her authority. Community safety, tradition, and decorum were repeated like a broken record. But everyone had seen the videos, the photos, the timestamps. They knew the truth. I calmly stood and addressed the room. The surveillance footage shows clear, documented instances of trespassing, intimidation, and harassment of a minor by the HOA president. Every action was illegal and recorded. There is no ambiguity. Every board member can review the evidence themselves. Kayla gasped, trying to interject, but I raised a hand. One by one, I displayed the evidence. Photos of her lurking behind fences, measuring mailboxes, pointing aggressively at my son, documenting every minor detail of my property. Footage of her yelling, her orange-pink suit conspicuous against the background. Every board member could see the truth clearly. The room fell silent, tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Her loyalists shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided eye contact. Some muttered excuses. And for the first time, Kayla realized she had no allies willing to back her. The weight of exposure pressed down. Power had shifted. Melissa finally spoke. "Enough. We've reviewed the evidence. Kayla, your actions are in clear violation of community bylaws and the law. Effective immediately, you are suspended from all HOA duties pending formal investigation. Any retaliatory actions against the Carter family or other residents will be met with legal consequences." Kayla's face went from disbelief to rage to humiliation. Her carefully crafted authority shattered in the room she once dominated. The orange-pink suit, once a symbol of dominance, now seemed like a costume in a theater of justice she no longer controlled. I watched as she tried to salvage her dignity, stammering, failing to assert herself. Every board member had witnessed the pattern of harassment. Every neighbor watching through discreet cameras or peeking from windows knew she had been exposed. The bully had been stripped of her tools of fear and deception. I turned to my son, who had observed quietly from the back. Today he learned that justice is not given. It is built by preparation, evidence, and calm courage. The fight is never about rage. It is about strategy and truth. Kayla stormed out of the room, muttering, her orange-pink suit wrinkled, her authority crumbled. The room exhaled collectively. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt free. The HOA had been humiliated, exposed, and stripped of its power. And my son learned firsthand how a bully could be outsmarted without escalating conflict unnecessarily. Victory had been secured, but there was still one final step to ensure the neighborhood would never fall under her tyranny again. The morning sun reflected off the dewy lawns, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood felt lighter. Whispers ran from house to house, but this time they were not whispers of fear. They were whispers of relief, curiosity, and cautious optimism. Kayla's orange-pink suit, once a symbol of control and intimidation, had become a memory of what the HOA could no longer enforce. Her authority was gone. The community had reclaimed its voice. I reviewed the last batch of surveillance footage, ensuring that every angle of previous trespasses and harassment was cataloged. Every motion alert, every timestamp, every photograph of Kayla's trespassing and aggressive behavior was duplicated, backed up, and ready for legal submission. Preparation had been key, but the outcome was now inevitable. The board had witnessed the truth, the neighbors had seen the evidence, and Kayla had no way to contest the facts. The formal HOA meeting convened in the clubhouse. The room was packed with residents, board members, and a few neighbors who had previously stayed in the shadows, intimidated into silence. I arrived with my son by my side, carrying the final dossier of evidence that would seal the fate of the once untouchable president. Kayla entered, head held high at first, but her confidence waned as she scanned the room. Every pair of eyes was fixed on her. Every camera, every phone, and every witness bore silent testimony to her actions. She was alone. The board began by addressing the documented violations. They presented the surveillance footage, photos, and timestamps to the entire community. Every motion alert, every moment of harassment, every unauthorized intrusion into private property was displayed. The residents watched in awe. Some gasped. Others whispered to each other, realization dawning. Kayla attempted to interrupt, but the board called her out. Your actions have violated every principle of fair community governance, they said. You have harassed a minor, trespassed on private property, and repeatedly abused your position of power. The evidence is undeniable. You are removed from all HOA duties, effective immediately, and will face legal review for your actions. Her orange-pink suit seemed almost comical now, a bright contrast to the humiliation on her face. She opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing that no words could salvage the reputation she had destroyed herself. Her loyal followers, some who had once feared her, now avoided eye contact, silently acknowledging that her reign of intimidation had ended. The room erupted with quiet, satisfied applause. Residents exchanged smiles and whispered thanks. Freedom felt tangible. The oppressive weight that had lingered for years was finally lifted. Neighbors who had been afraid to speak now stepped forward, asking questions, offering support, and reclaiming their voices. I knelt beside my son, placing a hand on his shoulder. Today you learned an important lesson, I said. Standing up to bullies is not about anger or confrontation. It is about preparation, strategy, and using evidence to ensure the truth prevails. He smiled, pride shining in his eyes. We did it, Dad. Yes, we did. And more importantly, the neighborhood had learned that no one, no matter how overbearing, is untouchable when the truth is on your side. The cameras, the evidence, the careful planning, they had protected us and exposed the abuses that had gone unchecked for years. Kayla left the room, her orange-pink suit wrinkled, her authority in shreds, and the community finally breathed freely. The HOA had been transformed, no longer a tool of intimidation, but a system governed by accountability and fairness. Residents discussed new rules, new board members, and safeguards to ensure that no one could ever exploit their position again. As my son and I walked home, the neighborhood looked different. Not because the houses had changed, but because the people had. Confidence replaced fear, respect replaced intimidation, and justice had been served. The bully was defeated, and the community thrived. I looked at my son and smiled. Today was proof that preparation, courage, and the pursuit of truth can overcome even the most aggressive and entrenched tyranny. The orange-pink suit had lost, and the neighborhood had won. The fight had been hard, but the victory was absolute. The community was free, and our family was finally safe. No one is untouchable. Bullies and people who abuse power can be stopped when you stay calm, stay prepared, and use the truth as your weapon. If you've ever been threatened or intimidated, remember you have the power to stand up and protect yourself. If you enjoyed the story, smash that like button, drop a comment sharing your experience with bullies, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next epic showdown. Justice is always sweeter when it's shared, and the next victory could inspire your entire neighborhood.